Karen, my mother, was born in Sydney in the late 1950s. She was the youngest of 6 children and grew up in a very stereotypical Australian way. Beaches, sport, and barbecues on the weekend. But if we go back to her grandparents, we see that the way they grew up was in a totally different fashion. Not just in a different way of life, but a different country altogether. This country was Russia. Karen's grandfather, Tadeusz William de Jong, was a Russian merchant seaman. He travelled the world and arrived in Australia in 1915. He was 23 years old at the time. Turns out he liked Australia so much that he decided to miss his boat back to Russia. Unfortunately for Tadeusz, the Australian government got a hold of him. They kindly gave him 2 options. One was to be deported back to Russia, or the second option was to join the Australian Army and fight in the First World War. He chose the latter. He was one of almost 1,000 Russian immigrants that were willing to risk their life for their new home. Just as Tadeusz was a merchant seaman, this was the case for the majority of his fellow countrymen. They had a reputation for being very hard-working, tough people who were almost fearless. Risking one's life for someone else's motherland is a huge ask, but it was something that these Russian Anzacs were willing to do. Even with this tough reputation, Tadeusz told my grandmother that when they landed in Gallipoli that they were very scared. She said that it would take a lot to scare him, so it must have been horrendous. Tadeusz ended up serving several years in the Australian Army before returning to Australia and becoming nationalised in 1940, where he lived his life out in Lilyfield, Sydney. Now, this is not a wild or unusual story for people of that era, or even today. Modern Australia is a multicultural country, which is built on the backs of immigrants and their cultures. Today, Australia has over a quarter of its population born overseas in a foreign country. Anyone who walks the streets of Sydney, or any other part of Australia, can see how all these different cultures have shaped Australia to be the country it is today. A country where everyone can get a chance to have a go and contribute to building a society which we all enjoy. All these different cultures have not only influenced, but also allow future Australia to evolve and take many perspectives that are needed for a dynamic nation that offers the willingness and prospect to change accordingly. Spasiba.